Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your source material, articles, notes, research you've gathered, and really dig in to find the most valuable insights. Think of it as your fast track to getting up to speed, hopefully with some surprising ideas and, a bit of fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Today we're diving into high school track and field,
Yeah.
specifically that absolute monster of an event, the 400-meter dash.
hmm
People call it the endurance sprint. And if you've ever coached it or run it, you know that label is, well, it's accurate, but maybe doesn't quite capture the sheer difficulty. It's a tough one.
It really is. And coaching it, especially at the high school level, adds layers of complexity. You've got athletes who are still developing, right?
Yeah.
And they come in with such different backgrounds. Some are just naturally fast. Some might have a solid aerobic base from other sports, maybe cross country.
And a whole lot haven't either.
Exactly. Many have neither. So for this deep dive, we've got some great sources. We're looking at insights from really experienced coaches like Clyde Hart, filtered through Derek Leininger's high school adaptations, and then Tony Holler, Feed the Cats, and also Ryan Banta's critical mass approach, plus some key research papers.
And what's really interesting is how they offer pretty different takes, sometimes even conflicting ideas on how to tackle the same race.
Definitely.
So our mission here is to give you a clear, practical, and scientifically informed way to think about training high school 400 runners, keeping those different athlete types in mind. We want to pull out the really crucial nuggets from these sources, help you understand what's happening physiologically in that race, and how these different training methods try to solve that puzzle.
Okay, sounds good. Let's jump in. Where do we start?
Let's start with a basic challenge. What makes the high school 400 so uniquely demanding?
Okay, so physiologically, it's fascinating because it straddles multiple energy systems. Right at the start, you're relying on the ATP-PC system. That's your immediate explosive power. One source describes those first maybe 6 seconds as free energy.
Free energy. I like that.
Yeah.
It instantly tells you why getting out hard, maybe for that first 50 meters, is so important, right? You have to
Right.
grab that energy while it's there.
Absolutely. But it runs out fast. Then, from about 6 seconds up to maybe 30 seconds, you shift heavily into the anaerobic glycolytic system. This gives you energy quickly, but it starts producing lactate as a byproduct.
Okay.
Around that 30-second mark, give or take, you hit what's called the crossover point. At this stage, energy production is roughly half anaerobic and half aerobic.
Right. And this feels like where the race really starts to change character. It goes from feeling fast to feeling, well, like the 400, that last
Yeah.
100, 150 meters.
Yeah. That's it, exactly. Because by around 40 seconds, that anaerobic system is really struggling, it's starting to fatigue, and lactate accumulation, as one source vividly puts it, goes through the roof. This is that infamous 40-second wall.
Where everyone feels it, the burn, the fatigue, everything hits hard.
Everyone. No one runs under 40 seconds, so every single 400 runner experiences this point of severe acidosis and fatigue. But here's the crucial point for high school runners based on these sources.
Okay.
Think about an elite guy running, say, 45 seconds. He only spends about 5 seconds after hitting that 40-second wall.
Right, just pushing through that final bit.
Now, compare that to a high school athlete. They might be running anywhere from 50 seconds to maybe 65 seconds or even more. So they are fighting beyond that 40-second wall for 10, 15, even 25 seconds.
Whoa. Okay, that's not a small difference.
Yeah.
That completely changes the nature of the effort, doesn't it?
It fundamentally changes it. For high school athletes, the 400 meters becomes a much, much longer duration event relative to their maximum speed capacity compared to elites.
That really reframes things.
Yeah.
It pushes back hard against that old idea, oh, the 400's a sprint, you don't need endurance. If you're spending maybe 20 seconds grinding it out after that 40-second mark, well, saying endurance doesn't matter seems plain wrong.
It really does. And while there's less research specifically on younger athletes compared to adults, what is available suggests that younger athletes, and females too, tend to rely a bit more on their aerobic systems, partly because their anaerobic systems aren't as fully developed.
Oh, interesting.
So this strongly implies that high school athletes actually need more endurance-focused preparation work that specifically gets them ready for that long haul past 30 or 40 seconds than an elite runner might need, relatively speaking.
So when you see kids die in that last 150,
Mm.
it's not necessarily that they're lazy or gave up.
Often not. It's more likely they just weren't trained to handle that shift towards greater aerobic reliance, and especially managing the fatigue and lactate buildup during what is, for them, a proportionally much longer final stretch of the race.
That makes so much sense. It clarifies why the training can't just be about pure speed. You have to prepare them for the whole distance, the whole duration at their speed.
Exactly. And what's cool is seeing how different successful coaches approach this. They all recognize the challenge, but they propose different ways to build that necessary mix of speed and endurance capacity. This is where we get into those different training philosophies.
Okay, let's dive into those. Let's start with Tony Holler and Feed the Cats. What's the core idea there?
Haller is very, very speed focused, almost radically so. His fundamental belief is that maximum speed is king. You've got to improve the athlete's top speed first and foremost. He argues that speed actually creates the endurance needed for the 400.
How does that translate into training?
It means low volume, very high intensity basically, sprinting fast, really fast, often but with tons of rest between reps to ensure every single one is high quality. He's famously outspoken against traditional aerobic work or tempo runs for sprinters.
Right. I've seen quotes where he says it negates speed, kills cats, or messes with running mechanics.
Yes, exactly. He believes that kind of work is counterproductive for sprinters, and he puts a massive emphasis on keeping athletes happy, healthy, and enjoying practice. He talks about the in-season goal often being just survival, maintaining speed and health, not grinding out fitness gains.
So how did he think they get the endurance needed for that last 100?
He suggests, controversially, that you can build the necessary aerobic capacity either by stacking together lots of high-quality anaerobic work or even through the weight room without doing any traditional distance running. It's pure speed, minimal volume.
Okay, so that's one end of the spectrum. Then you have a more, let's say, traditional approach, like Clyde Hart system, which Derek Leininger adapted for high school.
Right. Hart's philosophy is generally more periodized. It often moves from quantity to quality. So the early season focus might be on building a stronger aerobic base. The idea is this develops all the energy systems and helps athletes learn pace judgment.
So that involves more volume,
Yeah.
actual endurance running.
Yes, typically higher volume initially, things like longer runs, maybe LSD or fartlek in the off season, and then different kinds of tempo runs and speed endurance workouts throughout the preparation periods.
And Leininger's high school adaptation, how did that look?
From the sources, it seems he might start with, say, a higher number of 200-meter repeats or use 800s for over-distance work early on. There's this idea of initially needing to slow down to run faster,
Yeah.
building that base capacity before sharpening up. It's about making the traditional approach accessible and effective for developing high school runners.
Okay. And Hart had that famous line, didn't he? Something about it being easier to teach endurance to sprinters than speed to distance runners.
Exactly. Which kind of echoes Holler's focus on speed being hard to develop, but their methods for adding the endurance component are obviously worlds apart.
Right. Okay. And the third perspective we're looking at is Ryan Banta's critical mass system. How does that fit in?
Banta's approach is interesting. He often uses a short to long progression in terms of race distance focus, but a core idea is training all things at all times. It's more of a concurrent model, aiming to build a really resilient athlete.
All things at all times. What does that mean in practice?
It means he believes in touching on different qualities: speed, power, work capacity, which is his term for endurance, and recovery consistently, maybe with shifting emphasis each week. A big part of his system is using testing early and often
Testing for what purpose?
to let the athlete reveal themselves, as he puts it. The test results help him understand the athlete's strengths and weaknesses and then individualize the training plan much more effectively.
Does he include tempo work and longer intervals like Hart? Because Holler avoids those.
He does. Banta includes tempo and special endurance workouts. He argues, and his results back it up, that these longer, tougher intervals don't necessarily kill speed if you manage them correctly specifically, using them judiciously and providing lots of recovery between reps.
So sufficient recovery is the key there.
He emphasizes that. His goal is building a robust athlete who can handle the demands of a high school season, which often involves multiple races, sometimes over multiple days. His practices might be longer than Holler's, but they incorporate structured recovery within the session. He's looking for that critical mass of training, just enough volume and intensity to prepare for the 400 without sacrificing speed.
Okay, so we've got these three distinct viewpoints. Holler's speed first, low volume way, Hartliner's build the base, then add intensity model, and Banta's concurrent, test-driven, individualized approach. All targeting the same event, but with different roadmaps.
Yeah, it really shows there isn't just one magic formula. It's about finding the right balance for your athletes. Now, maybe we should break down the actual training components, the things that show up in these programs, even if the emphasis varies.
Good idea. Let's start with the absolute non-negotiable, developing raw speed, acceleration, and max velocity.
You have to have that top end gear. Holler's car analogy, right? How fast can your car go? So for acceleration, how quickly you get up to speed, you're looking at drills, things like A-skips, high knees, build-ups.
Short sprints too, right? Like
Good.
10, 20, 30 meters.
Exactly, from different starts blocks, standing, maybe three-point. And resisted sprints can help too, like pulling a light sled or running up a gentle hill. That builds specific power.
And then hitting that actual top speed, maximum velocity.
That's where you get into things like flying sprints.
Oh,
You have an acceleration zone, then you time a short segment, maybe 10, 20, 30 meters, where they're trying to run absolutely flat out. Also ins and outs, where they alternate between max speed bursts and relaxed floating.
and I've seen coaches use wickets or mini hurdles for that.
Yes, those are great for working on stride mechanics and rhythm at high speed. The key thing with all this max speed work, as the sources really emphasize, is that it's incredibly taxing on the nervous system. Meaning you have to do it when the athlete is fresh, like really fresh, usually 1-2 times a week, max. And the recovery between reps needs to be full. We're talking minutes, not seconds. Otherwise, you're not actually training max speed anymore. You're training something else, and the quality drops off.
Okay, full recovery is critical for speed. Got it. But as we established, the high school 400 isn't just pure speed. They need to hold on, manage that fatigue. How do these coaches build that specific speed endurance?
Right. This is where the philosophies really show their differences, especially in the amount and type of work. One common tool, particularly early season or in the general preparation phase, GPP, is extensive tempo.
What did that look like?
Think longer intervals at a lower intensity, maybe 70-75% effort, like maybe 8 to 12 repetitions of 200 meters, with a walk recovery often equal to the runtime or longer. The focus isn't killing yourself. It's more about rhythm, staying relaxed, building that aerobic work capacity.
That sounds like Leineter's slow down to run faster idea, building that foundation.
It fits perfectly there. Then you might progress to intensive tempo. This is faster, maybe 80-85% effort, but the reps are shorter, like 150s, maybe 6 to 10 reps. The recovery is still significant, maybe 2 to 4 minutes, but you're starting to tax that anaerobic glycolytic system more, producing more lactate.
Okay, bridging the gap towards race pace.
Exactly. Next up are the more race-specific workouts. Some coaches call these Special Endurance 1 or SE1. Now we're talking faster speeds, maybe 90-95% effort over distances like 150 to 250 meters. But the key here is the recovery gets much longer, maybe 6, 8, even 10 minutes.
Why so long?
Because the goal is lactate tolerance. You want the athlete to experience high lactate levels during the run, but then recover enough so they can hit the next rep with high quality again. It's about teaching the body to handle that acidic environment.
Training that burn.
And then you have the most specific work, often called Special Endurance 2 or race endurance. This is getting very close to race intensity, 90-100% effort over distances like 300 or 350 meters. Some systems, like Hart's, might even use over-distance runs like repeat 450s. But the recovery here is very long, 15, 20, even 30 minutes between reps.
Wow, that's almost a full practice between two runs.
Pretty much. It's designed to simulate the demands of the race, push lactate levels to their peak, and teach the athlete how to run fast while fatigued. Now, this is where the debate really heats up.
Because Haller avoids this kind of work.
Largely, yes. He sees this longer, high lactate, higher volume endurance work as detrimental, something that slows athletes down. But Hart, Leininger, and Banta view these types of workouts, especially SE1 and SE2, as essential building blocks, particularly for high school kids who spend so much time past that 40-second wall. They argue that if you dose it correctly and provide enough recovery, you build the necessary race-specific endurance without destroying speed.
Interesting tension there between the philosophies. Okay, so that covers the running components. What about strength training? How vital is that for a 400 runner?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. It's not just an add-on. It's a foundational piece for building a faster, more resilient runner. We're talking about several key qualities.
Like what?
Well, basic force production, how hard can you push against the ground? Explosive power, think about driving out of the blocks or pushing off each stride. Then there's reactive strength or elasticity, that springiness you get from the stretch shortening cycle.
How does elasticity help in a 400?
Better elasticity means you get more free energy return from the ground with each step. It improves running economy, meaning you use less energy to run at the same speed, which is huge for delaying fatigue in the later stages of the race.
Got it. What else from the weight room?
Core stability is huge. A strong core allows for efficient transfer of power from your limbs and helps maintain good posture when you get tired. And unilateral strength, because running is basically a series of single leg bounds. Strength training makes you more powerful and more efficient.
So it helps both speed and endurance in a way.
Definitely. A stronger, more elastic athlete generates more force and wastes less energy. The training itself should progress, starting with adaptation and maybe some muscle building in the off season, then moving towards maximal strength, converting that strength to power, and then maintaining it during the season.
And things like plyometrics, jumps and bounds.
Crucial for that reactive strength.
Yeah.
They should also progress from general jumps to more specific running-like bounds, always emphasizing good technique, quick ground contact, really maximizing that elastic return.
Okay, that paints a pretty comprehensive picture of the training elements.
Yeah.
Now, the big question, how do you apply all this to the kids who actually show up? You have total beginners, kids maybe trying track for the first time.
Right, and kids who might be pretty athletic already. Tailoring the approach is maybe the most important coaching skill here. Let's talk about the novice first, the kid with minimal fitness, maybe not fast, maybe doesn't have an aerobic background.
Yeah, the ones starting from scratch.
For them, you absolutely need a patient, gradual on-ramp. Those first, say, 4 to 6 weeks look very different. You can't just throw them into the standard workouts.
What should that on-ramp focus on?
Basic stuff. General motor skills, coordination, just getting comfortable moving. Light aerobic activity, maybe jogging mixed with walking breaks. Simple bodyweight exercises like squats, lunges, planks, flexibility work. And honestly, a huge focus needs to be on making it fun and positive.
Build the foundation, keep them coming back.
Exactly. It's about building the athlete before you build the 400 runner. This aligns perfectly with long-term athlete development or LTAD principles, especially that gradual progression of load. Don't rush the volume or intensity.
So when do they start doing anything that looks like sprinting?
Gradually. You introduce basic sprint drills, A-skips, high knees, butt kicks, focusing on technique. Then maybe very short accelerations like 10 or 20 meters, but again, full recovery. Let them feel what moving fast is like without fatiguing. Then, maybe some really gentle, extensive tempo, like just a few 100-meter strides at maybe 60–65% effort with a walk back. The emphasis is all on technique, consistency, gradual increases, and avoiding injury or burnout.
Makes sense. Okay, now what about the athletes who come in with something? Maybe they played soccer and have some endurance, or they're quick from basketball.
Yeah, these athletes can usually handle more specific 400 training sooner, but you still need to figure out what they bring to the table. Assessment is key. This is where testing, like Banta really emphasizes, becomes so valuable.
What kind of tests are useful?
Things like a flying 30-meter sprint can give you a good idea of their maximum speed potential. Banta uses a 400-meter time trial pretty early, like week 3, and says it can be surprisingly good at predicting end-of-season times. Other things, like a standing long jump or maybe some repeat bounding tests, can give you clues about their power and elasticity, even some basic strength tests.
And this testing helps you understand their athlete type, like speed dominant versus endurance dominant.
Exactly. Banta talks about how this data can hint at things like fiber type predominance, or maybe whether they rely more on their quads versus hamstrings. It's not perfect science, but it helps you see their natural strengths and weaknesses. An athlete who smashes the speed tests might need more focus on the endurance side. Someone who handles tempo well but lacks top speed obviously needs more max velocity work. It helps you individualize where to put the emphasis.
So how would the different philosophies adapt based on this?
Well, Holler would probably still treat them all like cats, push their top speed relentlessly, believing that speed reserve will eventually cover the endurance part. Hart and Leinener would likely move them through their periodized plan, maybe progressing faster through the early base-building phases if the athlete already has some aerobic capacity.
And Banta?
Banta would really use that test data to tailor the weekly focus. If someone's very fast but struggles with endurance, maybe their work capacity sessions get slightly more volume or focus. If they lack speed, max velocity days become even more crucial. He might decide to include those tough SE2 workouts, like the 2x450 meters, for an athlete whose profile suggests they need that specific stimulus and can handle it with a long recovery.
So it sounds like regardless of the overall philosophy, paying attention to how each individual responds, managing their recovery, considering their training age rookie versus veteran that's crucial across the board.
Absolutely. You have to coach the athlete in front of you, educating them about listening to their body, about sleep, nutrition. Those are universal principles. It's fundamental LTAD stuff.
Okay, so we've got the training pieces, we've thought about individualizing. How do we pull it all together for race day? Thinking about race strategy, peaking, the mental game.
Race modeling is huge. You can't just tell them to run hard. They need a plan for how to distribute their effort. Banta provides a pretty clear model that many coaches use in some form. Drive hard out of the blocks for maybe 60 meters, then maintain speed or even try to accelerate slightly down the backstretch. Focus on reinvesting effort and reaccelerating coming off the turn around 200, 300 meters. And then the final stretch is about holding form, using the arms, keeping the stride quick, fighting that fatigue.
And you practice that in workouts.
Yes, you apply that model to different interval distances. Running a 300-meter rep might involve practicing the drive phase and the backstretch with them. A 200-meter might focus on that reacceleration off the curve. It helps them learn the feel of the different race segments.
What about peaking? High school seasons can be long, with multiple championship meets.
Yeah, planning for maybe 2 or 3 peaks across the season is often necessary. Banta talks about cycling back through some GPP principles as you rebuild for a later peak. Holler's focus on survival in season is relevant here too, keeping athletes healthy and fast, not necessarily trying to add huge fitness gains late in the year, which risks injury or burnout.
Avoiding that overtraining trap.
Exactly. Especially being careful not to pile on too much high-intensity volume late in the season. That's key for actually performing well when it counts and aligns with LTAD ideas about preventing burnout and keeping motivation high.
And we touched on off-season work, but that's still a point of difference, isn't it? What to do in the fall.
It is. Haller strongly argues against traditional distance running for his sprinters in the fall. He sees it as undermining the speed development focus. Hart and Leininger typically include aerobic base work. Banta might suggest things like tempo runs or cross-training like biking or elliptical to build aerobic fitness with less impact. It just highlights again that for high school 400 runners, the question is about the right amount and type of conditioning, not whether any conditioning is needed.
Right. Lastly, the mental side. Getting athlete buy-in. Some kids think if the workout isn't incredibly painful, it's not working.
That's a big challenge. Coaches really need to communicate the why behind the training. Haller does this by making practice fun, celebrating effort, focusing on happiness. Banta uses things like interval cards, rewarding athletes for hitting target times on early reps, maybe letting them skip the last one. It motivates high-quality effort while acknowledging fatigue.
So it's not just about grinding them down.
No. Building mental toughness is part of it, learning to push through discomfort in those specific lactate tolerance workouts, like Haller describes. But it has to be balanced with creating a positive, supportive environment where athletes feel valued and motivated for the long haul, not just breaking them.
Man, okay. That was definitely a deep dive into the high school 400. We've hit the unique physiological demands, the different coaching blueprints, Haller, Hartline, Banta, the specific training ingredients like speed work, tempo, SE, strength.
Yeah, and how to tailor it for the kid just starting out versus the more experienced athlete, plus race strategy, peaking.
It really comes back to that core idea, doesn't it? The high school 400 is this tough endurance sprint. They need speed, yes, but also that specific conditioning to handle a proportionally much longer period of fatigue compared to elites.
Exactly. Success means developing raw speed, building that specific speed endurance appropriate for their race duration, adding strength and elasticity, and really individualizing based on who the athlete is and how they respond, and patience, especially with the novices.
And we saw there's no single right way. You've got the speed first camp, the build the base camp, the concurrent individualized camp, different paths to balancing that equation.
What really seems clear is that each approach can work if the coach understands the principles and applies them thoughtfully, adapting to the athletes they have. The coach's eye and ability to adjust seem paramount.
So here's something to think about, a final thought for you listening. We know high schoolers spend much longer in that painful zone past 40 seconds. And we've seen these different successful strategies for building the capacity to handle that, from Haller's low volume, speed is everything approach, to systems using more targeted endurance work. How might you best assess your athletes, their speed, their endurance, their strengths, their weaknesses, to figure out the right blend of these principles for them? How do you build their specific critical mass needed for the 400 this season? Where does your program strike that balance between pushing for pure speed and deliberately conditioning for that long, tough finish? Something to chew on.